The refugee camp stretched across the barren plains of Tessara like a wound upon the earth. Thousands of tents made from salvaged materials flapped in the cold wind, and the air carried the smell of smoke and desperation. Among the crowds of displaced beings, Serafina moved like a ghost. Her violet skin had lost its natural shimmer, dulled by weeks of hunger and fear. But nothing compared to the terror she felt now as she looked down at her daughter. Little Nyx lay wrapped in a thin blanket, her tiny chest rising and falling in labored breaths. The infant's silver eyes, once bright and curious, had grown dim. Dark veins spread across her translucent skin like cracks in fragile glass. Serafina knew the signs. She had seen this illness take other children from her world before it burned. The genetic plague that destroyed Valoria was still hunting them, even here among the stars. She pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead, whispering ancient prayers in a language that no longer had a home. But prayers were not enough. She needed medicine, technology, hope, things that refugees like her could never afford. The alien medical stations turned her away, their supplies too limited for non-critical cases. But Serafina knew her daughter was dying. She could feel it in her bones, in the way Nyx's small fingers no longer gripped hers with strength. That was when she heard about the human. Captain Marcus Webb ran a small medical outpost on the edge of the camp, one of the few human aid stations willing to work in the border zones. Humans were known for their stubborn compassion, their refusal to follow rules when lives were at stake. Some called them reckless. Others called them heroes. Serafina did not care what they were called. She only cared that they might save her child. She found the outpost as the twin suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. The building was barely more than a reinforced shelter, its walls covered in fading paint and patched metal. A line of sick and injured beings waited outside, but Serafina pushed past them. She had no time for courtesy. Her daughter was dying. Inside, the space was cramped and chaotic. Medical equipment hummed and beeped, and the sharp smell of disinfectant cut through the air. Volunteers moved between patients, their faces tired but determined. And there, in the center of it all, stood Marcus Webb. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and hands that moved with practiced precision as he sutured a wound on an elderly Crescen's arm. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and deep lines marked his weathered face.
8.
But his eyes held something Serafina had not seen in months. Kindness without condition. She stumbled forward, clutching Nyx against her chest. The room seemed to tilt, her vision blurring with exhaustion and tears. Marcus looked up, his hands stilling mid-stitch. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded space, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps not of faces but of shared pain. He too had known loss. She could see it written in the shadows beneath his eyes. Seraphine's voice came out as a broken whisper. But in the sudden quiet of the room, everyone heard her. "Please, my baby. She is dying. Help us, please." Her legs gave out and she fell to her knees, cradling Nyx protectively. The infant's breathing had grown more shallow, each tiny gasp a countdown to an ending Serafina could not accept. Marcus moved immediately, crossing the distance between them in 3 long strides. He knelt beside her, his large hands gentle as he carefully examined Nyx without taking her from Seraphine's arms.
Ah.
His colleague, Dr. Helena Vasquez, appeared at his shoulder. Her scanner already worried to life as she ran it over the infant's failing body. The device's lights flickered from green to yellow to red, and Helena's sharp intake of breath confirmed what Serafina already knew: genetic collapse. Helena's voice was quiet, professional, but edged with sympathy. Valorian strain. "We do not have authorization to treat cross-species genetic disorders. The regulations are clear. If we intervene and something goes wrong, it could mean the end of the entire program." Seraphine's heart shattered. She looked up at Marcus, her violet eyes swimming with tears that finally spilled over. "Please, I have nothing to give you. No money, no trade. But she is all I have left. My world is gone. Everyone I loved is dead. She is the only light in my darkness. Please do not let that light go out." Marcus stared down at the dying infant, then at the mother whose desperation mirrored his own buried grief. He knew the rules, knew the consequences of breaking them. The Military Oversight Committee would shut down his operation. Commander Jaren would have him court-martialed. Everything he had built here would crumble. But as he looked into Seraphine's eyes, he saw something that made all those consequences meaningless. He saw himself years ago, holding his own daughter as she slipped away from a disease he could not cure. In a war he could not stop, he made his choice in the space between heartbeats. Bring her to the surgical bay now. His voice cut through the tension like a blade, brooking no argument. Helena, prep the gene sequencer and pull every sample we have of compatible proteins. I do not care what the regulations say. This child will not die tonight. Helena hesitated for only a second before nodding sharply and moving into action. Serafina looked up at Marcus, her expression a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. You will help her? Truly, Marcus extended his hand to help her stand, his grip firm and warm. Will do everything in my power. That is my promise to you. Come with me, as Serafina rose on shaking legs, clutching her daughter close. She felt something she thought had died with her homeworld. She felt hope. And as Marcus led her deeper into the outpost, past the stares of other patients and the worried glances of his staff, neither of them realized that this moment would change not just their lives, but the fate of two entire civilizations. Sometimes the most profound revolutions begin with a single act of compassion between strangers. The surgical bay was barely larger than a storage closet, its walls lined with salvaged medical equipment that hummed and chirped in discordant harmony. Marcus cleared the examination table with a sweep of his arm, sending data pads and supply containers clattering to the floor. Serafina laid Nyx down gently, her hands trembling as she smoothed the thin blanket around her daughter's fragile form. The infant's breathing had become so shallow that her chest barely moved. Time was running out like sand through desperate fingers. Helena worked with fierce efficiency, her fingers flying across holographic displays as she pulled up genetic databases and treatment protocols. Her dark eyes flickered with concern as she read the results. Captain, the genetic degradation is accelerating. The Valorian plague attacks the cellular repair mechanisms. Without intervention, she has maybe 6 hours, maybe less. She paused, her voice dropping. And we have never attempted cross-species gene therapy on an infant this young. The human proteins might be rejected entirely. It could kill her faster. Marcus stripped off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, his jaw set with determination. Then we make sure that does not happen. Start synthesizing a compatibility bridge using my genetic template. My DNA has the broadest compatibility markers in our database. If anything can bond with her system, it will be that. Your DNA? Helena's eyes widened. Marcus, that is not just bending the rules, that is obliterating them. If the committee finds out you used your own genetic material in an unauthorized alien treatment, they will not just shut us down. They will put you in prison. Marcus met her gaze without flinching. Then they will have to catch me first. Begin the synthesis. That is in order, Doctor. Helena held his stare for a long moment before nodding curtly and turning to her equipment. She understood. Some lines were worth crossing when lives hung in the balance. Serafina watched the exchange with wide eyes, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what this human was risking for her child. She reached out tentatively, her slender fingers brushing against Marcus's arm. Why? Why would you do this for us? You do not know me. You do not know her. We are nothing to you. Marcus looked down at the infant on the table. His expression softened with a sorrow that seemed to age him 10 years in an instant. I had a daughter once. Her name was Emily. She was 7 when the colony fell. He paused, his voice catching. There was an outbreak. A plague, not unlike what is killing your child. I was off-world, leading a relief mission. By the time I got back, she was already gone. He lifted his eyes to meet Seraphine's gaze, and in them she saw a pain that mirrored her own. I could not save her, but maybe I can save yours. Tears streamed down Seraphine's face as she understood. This was not just about regulations or protocols. This was about redemption, about making meaning from unbearable loss. She placed her hand over his, her touch light, but filled with gratitude beyond words. Thank you. Whatever happens, thank you for trying. The hours that followed blurred into a desperate dance between science and hope. Marcus worked with steady hands, injecting the synthesized gene therapy into Nix's tiny arm, while Helena monitored every fluctuation in the infant's vital signs. The treatment needed time to integrate, to rewrite the failing code in Nix's cells, before the collapse became irreversible. All they could do was watch and wait. Serafina refused to leave her daughter's side, her hand resting on Nix's chest to feel each precious breath. Marcus pulled up a chair beside her, his own exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. The medical bay's dim lighting cast long shadows across his face, making him look like a warrior fresh from battle. In a way, he was. Tell me about Valoria. Marcus's voice was quiet, an invitation rather than a demand. What was it like before the war? Serafina glanced at him, surprised by the question. Most humans had little interest in alien cultures beyond their strategic value. But Marcus's expression held genuine curiosity, a desire to see her as more than just another refugee with a sad story. She took a breath and let herself remember. It was a world of music. Every morning the crystal forests would sing as the wind passed through them. We lived in harmony with the land, building our cities into the living rock so as not to disturb the natural beauty. Her voice grew softer, tinged with longing. I was a teacher. I taught younglings about the old ways, the songs and stories passed down through generations. My partner, Dren, was a sculptor. He could make stone dance was, Marcus asked gently. Serafina nodded, her eyes distant. He died defending our city when the invaders came. He told me to take Nix and run. He told me to survive. So I did. She looked down at her daughter. Sometimes I think surviving is harder than dying. Every day I carry the weight of everyone we lost. Marcus was quiet for a long moment before speaking. I know that weight. After Emily, I almost quit. I thought about going somewhere remote, somewhere I could forget. But then I realized that forgetting would be another death. So instead, I came here. I figured if I could not save my daughter, maybe I could save someone else's. Serafina turned to look at him fully, seeing him not as a rescuer or a stranger, but as a kindred spirit forged in the same fires of grief and resilience. You are a good man, Marcus Webb. Your Emily would be proud. His eyes glistened, but he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes for the first time since they met. I hope so. I really do. They sat together in comfortable silence, two broken souls finding unexpected solace in shared understanding. Hours passed, marked by the steady beeping of monitors and the soft hum of medical equipment. And then, just as exhaustion began to pull at Seraphine's eyelids, Helena gasped. The monitors lit up with cascading green indicators. Captain, look. The genetic markers are stabilizing. The therapy is working. She is responding. Marcus leaned forward, his trained eye scanning the data with growing hope. Seraphine's hand flew to her mouth as Nick stirred for the first time in hours, her tiny fingers curling into a fist. The dark veins on her skin began to fade, color returning to her translucent cheeks. It was working. Against all odds, the impossible was happening. Nix was healing. Serafina broke down completely, sobs of relief shaking her entire body. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. She is strong, just like her mother. Serafina looked up at him through her tears, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Gratitude transformed into something deeper, something neither of them expected. Their eyes held, and the air seemed charged with unspoken emotion. Helena cleared her throat diplomatically. I will monitor her through the night. You both should rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Marcus nodded slowly, reluctantly breaking eye contact with Serafina. He stood and offered his hand. Come, I will show you where you can sleep. You need rest too. Serafina took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his naturally, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. As they walked out of the medical bay, leaving Nix and Helena's capable care, neither spoke, but both felt it. The beginning of something that defied logic, that crossed boundaries, thought insurmountable. In a universe that had taken so much from them both, perhaps it was finally giving something back. And as the twin moons of Tessara rose over the refugee camp, casting silver light through the window, Marcus and Seraphina stood together, hands still joined. Watching over the child that had brought them together, neither knew what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, they faced it not alone. Morning light filtered through the patched walls of the medical outpost, casting geometric patterns across the floor. Seraphina woke with a start, momentarily disoriented before remembering where she was. Marcus had given her his own quarters, a small room barely large enough for a cot and a storage trunk. She had protested, but he insisted, saying he would sleep in the office. The simple kindness of clean sheets and a locked door had felt like unimaginable luxury after months in the open camp. She rushed to the medical bay, her heart in her throat. What if the treatment had failed during the night? What if Nyx had taken a turn? But when she pushed through the door, relief flooded through her so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Nyx was awake, her silver eyes bright and alert. Tracking the movement of a small light Helena was using to check her responses, the dark veins were almost completely gone. Her skin glowed with healthy luminescence. "Mama," the tiny voice was weak but clear, the first word Nyx had spoken in days. Seraphina swept her daughter into her arms, pressing kisses to her forehead, her cheeks, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "My star, my little star. You came back to me." Marcus stood in the doorway, watching the reunion with a soft expression. He had not slept, evident from the shadows under his eyes and the rumpled state of his uniform. But his face held satisfaction, the kind that came from winning a battle against impossible odds. Helena looked up from her instruments and smiled. "She is improving faster than I dared hope. The gene therapy is integrating beautifully. With continued monitoring, I believe she will make a full recovery." Seraphina looked at Marcus over her daughter's head, her eyes shining with tears of joy and gratitude. "How can I ever repay you?" Marcus shook his head. "You owe me nothing. Seeing her awake, seeing you smile, that is payment enough." But his eyes lingered on Seraphine's face, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with relief. The following days fell into a rhythm. Marcus insisted that Seraphina and Nyx stay at the outpost where he could monitor Nyx's recovery personally. During the day, he tended to the endless stream of patients while Seraphina helped where she could, organizing supplies and translating for alien refugees who did not speak standard. At night, after Nyx fell asleep, Marcus and Seraphina would sit together in the small office, sharing stories over cups of bitter camp coffee. She told him about Valorian festivals, where entire cities would illuminate in synchronized bioluminescence, creating waves of color visible from space. He described growing up on Earth, running through golden wheat fields with his brothers. It's the simple joy of summer rain on bare skin. They spoke of their losses, their regrets, and slowly, carefully, their hopes for futures they had thought lost forever. One evening, as Seraphina carefully cleaned a cut on Marcus's hand, he had gotten it repairing a broken generator. Their proximity felt charged with something unspoken. Her fingers traced the lines of his palm, feeling the calluses earned through years of hard work and harder choices. "You have strong hands, hands that heal and build. On my world, we believed you could tell a person's spirit by their hands. Yours speak of courage and compassion." Marcus's breath caught slightly at her touch. "What do your hands say?" he asked quietly. Seraphina looked down at her own slender fingers, so different from his. "Mine have known sorrow, but perhaps with time they might remember joy." She lifted her gaze to meet his, and the air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. Marcus reached up slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. His fingertips brushed her cheek, and Seraphina leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "I see joy when I look at you. Despite everything you have endured, you still shine. That is the most extraordinary thing I have ever witnessed." They leaned closer, drawn by a gravity neither could resist. Their lips met softly, tentatively, a question and answer all at once. Seraphine's hand moved to his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and pain dissolving in the warmth of connection. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless, their foreheads resting together. "We should not," Serafina whispered, though her hands contradicted her words by tightening in the fabric of his shirt. "Your people? My people? The regulations?" "I know." Marcus's voice was rough. "I know all the reasons this is impossible. But Serafina, when I am with you, it's impossible seems like just another challenge to overcome." Their moment was shattered by urgent footsteps in the corridor. Helena burst into the office, her face pale. "Captain, we have a problem. Commander Jaren is here with an inspection team. Someone reported unauthorized treatments. We have maybe 2 minutes before they reach the medical bay." Marcus was on his feet instantly, his mind racing. "Get Serafina and Nyx out through the supply entrance. Take them to the south sector. I will handle Jaren," but Serafina grabbed his arm. "I will not let you face this alone. If they have come for answers, then I will tell them the truth. You saved my daughter when no one else would. I will not hide from that." Marcus looked at her, his expression torn between admiration and fear. "If you testify, they will use you against both our peoples. They will say I exploited a desperate refugee for experimental purposes. They will twist this into something ugly. I cannot let that happen to you. Then we stand together." Seraphine's voice was steady, her resolve clear. "Whatever comes, we face it side by side." Marcus stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. The sound of boots in the corridor grew louder. "Together, then. Always." He took her hand. Their fingers intertwining one more time before the door opened and Commander Jaren strode in, his face set with grim purpose. The battle they had won for Nyx's life was nothing compared to the war they were about to face for their right to love across the stars. The council chamber on Tessera Station was built to intimidate. Its vaulted ceiling and polished obsidian walls designed to make those who stood in judgment feel small and exposed. Marcus and Serafina stood side by side in the center of the circular room. Surrounded by tiered seating were representatives from both human and alien. Governments watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Above them, holographic displays projected evidence, medical records, and security footage from the outpost. Commander Jaren paced before them like a predator circling prey, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice echoing off the stone. "Captain Webb, you stand accused of violating Protocol 7 of the Interspecies Medical Ethics Code. Specifically, the unauthorized genetic manipulation of an alien minor using human biological material. How do you plead?" Marcus's jaw was set, his shoulders square despite the exhaustion that pulled at him. "I acknowledge my actions, Commander, but I do not acknowledge any wrongdoing. I saved a child's life. That is my duty as a physician and as a human being. To hell with protocols that prioritize paperwork over breathing babies." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Ambassador Thorne, a severe woman with steel-gray hair and harder eyes, leaned forward from her seat. "You took it upon yourself to decide which laws apply to you. Your arrogance is staggering, Captain. The regulations exist to prevent exploitation, to ensure that our medical technology is not weaponized or used to create dependencies among vulnerable populations. You have jeopardized decades of careful diplomatic balance." From the alien side of the chamber, Matriarch Silvera rose slowly, her forearms folded in a gesture of formal judgment. Her species, the Athrani, were known for their rigid adherence to social order. The human shows the typical disregard for consequence that plagues his kind. But the Valorian female is equally culpable. She allowed herself and her offspring to become subjects of experimentation. This behavior threatens to set dangerous precedents. Serafina stepped forward. Her chin lifted despite the fear coursing through her veins. Dangerous? What is dangerous is a universe where a mother must watch her child die because helping her might create political inconvenience. Captain Webb did not experiment on my daughter. He saved her when everyone else turned away. If that is a crime, then your laws are broken, not him. The chamber erupted in heated debate. Some voices called for Marcus's imprisonment, others for exile. Alien representatives argued among themselves about whether Serafina should face charges for accepting unauthorized treatment. The noise swelled until Elder Morwen, an ancient Crescian with wisdom-lined features, raised his hand for silence. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of centuries. Perhaps we are asking the wrong questions. The child lives and thrives. The treatment was successful. Should we not examine why our carefully constructed rules failed to provide a path to this outcome through legal means? Ambassador Thorne's expression hardened. The rules exist because emotion clouds judgment. If we allow individuals to decide when laws apply, we descend into chaos. She turned her cold gaze on Marcus. And you, Captain, you did not just perform unauthorized treatment. You used your own genetic material. The psychological implications alone are staggering. You have bonded yourself biologically to this alien child. Some might call that an attempt at claiming ownership. Marcus's control finally snapped. His voice rang out with fury that silenced the chamber. Ownership. I gave that child a chance at life using the only tool I had available. If my DNA is now part of what sustains her, then I am honored, not possessive. And if you want to talk about psychological implications, let us discuss the psychology of a system that values political comfort over the screams of dying children. He turned to face the full assembly, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. Yes, I broke your protocols, and I would do it again. I would do it 1,000 times because every regulation, every law, every carefully written code of conduct means nothing if we lose our humanity in the process of following them. His eyes found Seraphine's, and his voice softened. This woman stood before me with her child dying in her arms, and she begged for help. In that moment, I was not a human, and she was not an alien. We were just two souls who had known unbearable loss, and I had the power to prevent her from losing what little she had left. So I used it. Seraphine's eyes filled with tears. She moved closer to Marcus, her hand finding his. And in doing so, he gave me more than my daughter's life. He gave me hope that kindness still exists in this universe. She turned to address the assembly, her voice growing stronger with each word. You speak of laws and protocols, but where were those laws when my world burned? Where were your rules when my people were scattered across the stars like dust? Captain Webb showed me something I thought I would never see again. He showed me that some beings still choose compassion over convenience. She took a deep breath, her next words carrying the weight of absolute truth. And yes, something else happened between us. Something your laws never anticipated. We fell in love. The chamber went utterly silent, shock registering on faces throughout the tears. We did not plan it. We did not seek it. But when two people face darkness together and choose to fight for light, connection forms. Beautiful, terrifying, undeniable connection. So if you want to punish us for breaking your rules, then do it. But you cannot punish us for being alive, for feeling, for caring. Marcus's hand tightened around hers. We understand the complications. We know our feelings cross boundaries your civilizations have worked to maintain. But denying what we feel would be another kind of death. And we have both died enough in this life. He looked at Serafina, his eyes holding everything words could not express. She is my heart now, and I am hers. Condemn us if you must, but you cannot unmake what has been forged. The silence stretched long and heavy. Then, unexpectedly, Elder Morwen began to laugh. It started soft but grew until his whole frame shook with mirth. The chamber stared at him in confusion until he finally spoke. Forgive an old fool his amusement, but I have lived 3 of your human centuries and I have seen many things. But I have never seen 2 civilizations so frightened of something as simple and powerful as love. He stood, his ancient bones creaking. This human and this Valorian have shown us something profound. They have demonstrated that our carefully maintained separations, our protocols and regulations, they cannot stop life from happening. They cannot prevent hearts from recognizing kindred spirits across the void. Matriarch Silvara's voice was icy. You suggest we simply ignore law because of sentiment? Morwen shook his head. I suggest that perhaps our laws need to evolve to acknowledge reality. The universe is changing. Species are mixing out of necessity after wars and disasters. If we cling to old rules that no longer serve, we'll strangle the very future we claim to protect. Ambassador Thorne stood abruptly. This council will reassess to consider the evidence and testimony. Captain Webb, Citizen Seraphina, you will be held pending our decision. As guards moved forward, Marcus pulled Seraphina close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Whatever they decide, it was worth it. Every moment. Seraphina nodded against his chest, her arms wrapping around him. Always worth it. Even if the stars themselves try to pull us apart, I will find my way back to you. They were led away in different directions, but their eyes held until the last possible second, carrying a promise that no judgment could break. The trial was not over, but something larger than law had been set in motion. Sometimes love was not just a feeling, but a revolution. 3 days passed in separate confinement cells. 3 days where Marcus paced the small space, and Seraphina held Nyx close, whispering reassurances she did not quite believe. But on the morning of the 4th day, they were brought back to the council chamber. The atmosphere had shifted. The hostility had not disappeared, but something else hummed beneath it. Uncertainty. Possibility. Elder Morwen stood at the center of the assembly, his ancient eyes sweeping across both human and alien representatives. We have deliberated extensively. This case has forced us to examine not just the actions of 2 individuals, but the frameworks that govern our interconnected civilizations. What we have found is uncomfortable, but necessary to acknowledge. Our regulations, while well-intentioned, have failed to account for the reality of our current era. Wars and catastrophes have thrown our species together in ways we never anticipated. Rigid separation is no longer practical or humane. Ambassador Thorne's expression was controlled, but tension showed in the line of her shoulders. We are not prepared to abandon all protocols. The potential for abuse remains significant. But Morwen raised a hand. We do not suggest abandonment. We suggest evolution. He gestured to where Nyx sat on Seraphine's lap, the infant's silver eyes bright and healthy. This child is living proof that human and alien biology can work in harmony. The treatment Captain Webb developed, while unauthorized, represents a breakthrough that could save countless lives across multiple species. Matriarch Silvara spoke, her forearms unfolding in a gesture of reluctant acceptance. The Athrani delegation has agreed to a proposal. Rather than punishment, we recommend the establishment of a joint medical research initiative. Captain Webb and his team will work under supervision to refine and formalize the treatment protocols he pioneered. This knowledge will be shared across all allied species. With proper safeguards and oversight, Marcus felt hope kindle in his chest for the first time since his arrest. And Seraphina? What of the charges against her? A different voice answered, one Marcus recognized with surprise. Commander Jaren stepped forward, his stern face softened by something that might have been respect. The charges against Citizen Seraphina are dismissed. Upon review, it is clear she acted as any parent would, desperately, but not recklessly. She trusted a physician's judgment in a crisis. That is not a crime in any jurisdiction. Seraphina sagged with relief, her arms tightening around Nyx. But the question none of you have addressed hangs heaviest. She looked at Marcus, her eyes vulnerable. What of the relationship that has formed between us? Will you legislate away what we feel? Will you forbid our hearts because they beat across species lines? The chamber fell silent again. Finally, Elder Morwen smiled gently. We cannot forbid the ocean to touch the shore, nor the stars to shine in distant skies. What you and Captain Webb have found is rare and precious. While we cannot officially sanction an interspecies union, there are no laws that explicitly forbid it either. The gap in our regulations is, for once, a mercy rather than an oversight. You may be together, though the path will not be easy. Marcus crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. Pulling Seraphina and Nyx into his embrace, tears streamed down Seraphine's face as she buried her face in his chest. We can truly stay together? We do not have to hide? Marcus kissed the top of her head, his voice thick with emotion. Together, Always. I promise you that. Ambassador Thorne cleared her throat. There are conditions. You will both undergo regular psychological evaluations to ensure the relationship remains healthy and consensual. Any children, should you choose to have them, will be subjects of scientific interest and monitoring. You will, in essence, become a case study. Can you accept these terms? Marcus and Serafina exchanged a long look before answering in unison. Yes. Anything. Morwen nodded approvingly. Then this council renders its final judgment. Captain Marcus Webb, you are hereby assigned to lead the newly formed Interspecies Medical Initiative. Your sentence is to continue doing what you do best, saving lives, but now with resources and support. Citizen Serafina, if you wish, there is a position available as cultural liaison for the program. Your perspective will be invaluable. Seraphine's eyes widened. You would trust me with such responsibility? Morwen chuckled. My dear, you stood in this chamber and defended not just your love, but the principle of compassion itself. You have proven your character beyond any doubt. As the council formally adjourned, people began to approach Marcus and Serafina, some offering congratulations, others still skeptical, but willing to see how this experiment unfolded. Dr. Helena Vasquez pushed through the crowd, her face split by a rare smile. You did it, you stubborn idiots. You've actually changed the system. Marcus laughed, the sound filled with relief and joy. We had excellent help. Thank you, Helena, for everything. Weeks later, the new medical facility opened in the rebuilt sector of Tessara. It was clean, well-equipped, and staffed by volunteers from a dozen species. Marcus stood at the entrance, watching the steady stream of patients and feeling something he had not felt in years. Purpose without pain, hope without reservation. Serafina appeared at his side, Nyx balanced on her hip. The baby reached for Marcus with chubby arms, and he took her gladly, spinning her around until she giggled with delight.